Get off my field! Coach Reddick's voice cracked through the rain like a whip. The whistle hung from his neck, trembling with fury as the rest of the team froze mid-drill. Marcus stood there, mud dripping from his helmet, clutching the football like it was the last thing tethering him to dignity. "I said off!" Reddick barked again, marching closer, his face red and eyes burning with contempt. "You think because you can throw a couple of good passes you run my team?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Coach, I was just following the play you called. Don't talk back to me, boy." The word cut deep, sharp, deliberate, echoing over the soaked field. The players exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Reddick ripped the ball from Marcus's hands and tossed it into the mud. "You're benched. And if you've got a problem with that, you can take your attitude somewhere else." The crowd from the bleachers fell silent. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Marcus clenched his jaw, the sting of humiliation settling in his chest. This wasn't about a missed pass. It never was. Behind the rage in Reddick's voice, Marcus could hear what wasn't being said, what had always been said without words in this town. And still, he stood his ground. No one spoke. Not the linemen who practiced beside him every day, not the receivers he threw to, not even the assistant coaches. The only sounds were the rain slapping against the turf and the distant hum of the floodlights. Marcus turned slowly, searching for a single face willing to meet his eyes. But all he found were lowered heads and half-hearted shrugs. Jamal shifted uneasily near the sideline, jaw tight but silent. Others looked away, afraid of being next. It wasn't just about football anymore. It was about belonging, and how easily belonging could be taken away when the wrong person held the whistle. Marcus took a deep breath, each exhale heavier than the last. The silence screamed louder than Reddick ever could. Reddick turned toward the bench, wiping rain from his face. "Tommy!" The white backup quarterback jogged over, helmet gleaming under the lights. "Now," Reddick said, his voice calmer but dripping with venom, "watch how a real leader runs the offense." The words lingered, sharp enough to slice through Marcus's pride. Tommy hesitated, glancing awkwardly at Marcus before taking the ball. "Coach, he was doing fine. Don't argue," Reddick snapped. "Just show us what leadership looks like." Marcus felt his stomach twist. He'd heard that tone before, in classrooms, in locker rooms, at job interviews. It was the tone that said, "You can work twice as hard, but you'll never be enough." As Tommy lined up under center, Reddick's praise came instantly, exaggerated and loud. "That's how it's done." Smooth, confident, thinking like a quarterback. Marcus turned away. Every word felt like a weight pressing him deeper into the mud. Marcus clenched his fists, knuckles white under the dim light. The air buzzed with thunder and resentment. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Keep your head high, baby. Let your game speak for you." But how could it when his voice was constantly being drowned out? He stared at Reddick, heart pounding. Every muscle screamed to say something, to fight back, to call out what everyone already knew but refused to admit. Yet he stayed silent, because silence was safer, because anger would only prove Reddick right, at least in the coach's eyes. Lightning flashed, casting his shadow across the field like a warning. One more storm waiting to break. Marcus blinked through the rain, refusing to look defeated. Not tonight. Then, through the chaos, a new voice cut through the storm. Calm, deep, controlled. "Are you sure about that, coach?" Heads turned. Even Reddick froze, his whistle halfway to his lips. From the bleachers, a figure in a hooded jacket stood up, water dripping from his sleeves. The crowd murmured, whispers spreading fast. "Who's that?" someone asked. The man stepped forward, removing his hood. The lights hit his face, unmistakable. "Patrick Mahomes." The crowd gasped. Phones came out, cameras flashing through the rain. Mahomes didn't smile. "I've been watching your practice, coach. Interesting way to develop talent," Reddick stammered, his voice trembling. "Mr. Mahomes, I didn't know you were—" "You didn't need to," Mahomes said flatly. "You just needed to treat your players right." Marcus's breath caught. The tension that had buried him moments ago began to shift, just slightly, as every eye turned back to him. Marcus's mind went blank. Reddick stood frozen, drenched and speechless. The team stared, silent, unsure whether to move or breathe. Mahomes looked at Marcus, a nod of respect, quiet and powerful. In that instant, everything changed. The storm outside had nothing on the one that was coming. The whistle from that night still rang in Marcus's ears. Hours later, under flickering field lights, he stood alone. Same field, different time. The crowd was gone, but his dreams stayed loud. He gripped the ball, whispering to himself, footwork, balance, follow through. He'd watched every Patrick Mahomes highlight 100 times, not just for the throws, but for the calm. That unshakable belief that greatness didn't need permission. Each pass he launched into the night was a quiet rebellion against every doubt ever thrown his way. He wasn't just playing for a scholarship. He was throwing for freedom, from a town that told him to know his place. The ball landed softly in the grass. He stood still, breathing heavy, the silence wrapping around him like a challenge. Tomorrow, the world will test him again, and he'd be ready. The next morning, the world he lived in looked the same. Rows of trucks outside diners, Friday night banners hanging proudly. Football wasn't just a game here. It was religion. But even religion had rules about who got to be the hero. They cheered when Marcus scored, but whispered when he walked past. Talented, but, attitude, they'd say. Fast, but not really a thinker. He heard it all, the coded phrases that coded bias with politeness. This was the kind of place that loved its black athletes, just not its black leaders. And Marcus? He wanted to lead. After school, the lights changed again, from stadium floodlights to the dull glow of a diner kitchen. Marcus wiped tables, washed dishes, and took orders with a tired smile. His mom worked the late shift at the hospital, so he picked up what hours he could. "Don't burn yourself out," she'd say, pressing his hand. "You're carrying enough already." He'd laugh softly. "Can't drop the ball now, Mom?" It wasn't just money he was chasing. It was proof. Proof that hard work could silence doubt, even if the doubt came wearing a whistle and a smirk. When he got home, his cleats waited by the door, still caked with mud. He never let them dry at Ridgeview High. Marcus Reed wasn't just another player. He was a statistic that made people uncomfortable. The first and only black quarterback in school history. Some wore that fact like pride. Others treated it like a problem. Every bad pass felt like confirmation to the ones waiting for him to fail. Every touchdown was dismissed as luck. He learned to smile through it, to turn pressure into fuel. But some nights it was heavier than pads and helmets combined. He'd stare at the team photos on the wall, rows of faces that didn't look like his, and promise to earn his place anyway. Yet for all the judgment, Marcus never stopped showing up for others. He stayed after practice to help a freshman with his throws. He tutored teammates struggling to stay eligible. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. He led not with speeches, but with actions, the kind that didn't make headlines but built respect in silence. And though few saw it, those quiet moments were what defined him most. Even Reddick couldn't erase that kind of integrity. As Marcus packed up after another long night, one phrase looped in his mind, Reddick's voice. Cold and certain. "You're not leadership material." He swallowed the memory like a bitter taste, but deep down, a defiant thought burned back. "Then I'll redefine what leadership looks like." "Do it again, Marcus." Coach Reddick's voice cut through the practice field like a slap. Marcus had just launched a perfect pass, spiral tight, timing flawless. The ball hit the receiver in stride. The team clapped. But Reddick didn't even blink. "You call that accuracy?" The coach barked. "You're rushing your mechanics. Reset." Marcus swallowed the sting. "Yes, coach." Minutes later, Tommy, the backup, mimicked the exact play. The throw wobbled, landing a step short. Reddick's face lit up. "That's what I'm talking about." "Great poise, Tommy." Real quarterback instincts. The players exchanged awkward glances. Marcus stood silent, heat crawling up his neck. He'd felt it before. That quiet double standard that didn't need words to sting. As he lined up for another rep, His jaw clenched. He knew what this was. This wasn't about accuracy. It was about who was throwing the ball, and no matter how perfect his throw was, he'd always be told to do it again. Later that day, during drills, Reddick's tone shifted from harsh to smug. Quarterbacks need to think, not just run, he said loudly, looking straight at Marcus. You've got the athleticism, kid, but leadership's up here. He tapped his temple. It's a thinking position. The message wasn't subtle. Tommy chuckled under his breath. A few others followed, half-hearted, unsure. Marcus forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, coach. I'll think harder next time. Reddick nodded, pretending not to catch the sarcasm. Good attitude. That's what I like to see. Marcus's stomach turned. He knew that tone, the kind that said you're fast, not smart, strong, not strategic. The insult wasn't in the words themselves. It was in the intent behind them, a coded reminder that no matter how sharp he played, he'd still be seen as the athlete, never the mind of the game. In the locker room, the air hung heavy with silence. Jamal sat beside Marcus, lowering his voice. Man, you see what he's doing, right? Marcus looked down, untying his cleats. It's just coaching. He's tough on everyone. Jamal shook his head. Nah, bro. He's not tough. He's targeting. There's a difference. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't want to believe it. Not yet. But Jamal leaned closer. Watch yourself. He's setting you up to fall. Just don't give him the excuse he's looking for. Marcus stared at the floor, the truth pressing heavier than his helmet. The whispers started small, behind locker doors, in hallways. During film review, he's too emotional to lead. Guy's got an attitude problem. Good runner, but not exactly cerebral. Marcus pretended not to hear. But every word landed like a bruise. Even the assistant coach, pretending to joke, once said, Tone it down, Marcus. People might think you're angry. He smiled through it, gripping his towel until his knuckles went white. They called it locker room talk, but it was poison. Quiet, subtle, designed to make him question himself. The same voices that cheered his touchdowns now doubted his temperament. He was learning that racism in football didn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispered just loud enough for him to hear. One evening, Marcus walked past the coach's office after hours. Laughter slipped through the cracked door. Boosters like Tommy's dad, they keep this program running, the assistant said. The kid's not starting, they'll raise hell. Reddick's voice followed. We'll give Reed some snaps for show. But the boosters make the calls, not me. Marcus froze. So that was it. It wasn't about performance or talent. It was about politics, connections, and image. He'd been playing on a tilted field long before the game even began. As he walked away, his chest tightened, not from anger but from clarity. The game was rigged, and now he knew the rules. Marcus started staying late after every practice. More throws, more drills, more hours than anyone. He worked like the world was watching, but it never seemed to notice. Each improvement was met with silence. Each mistake with a lecture. No matter what he did, the target on his back only grew. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, and for the first time, Marcus felt what every black athlete before him had felt, unseen, yet constantly judged. But hope, that stubborn spark, refused to die. The scouts were coming next Friday. One game, one chance. Marcus knew the odds, knew the bias, knew what people whispered when he wasn't around. Still, he tightened his grip on the ball and told himself, this time, they'll have to see me. Marcus, you're benched. The words hit harder than any tackle. He blinked, certain he'd misheard. What? Coach Reddick didn't look up from his clipboard. You're sitting this one out. Tommy's starting. The noise of the stadium, the chants, the marching band, the Friday night lights, all faded. Months of work, endless drills, late-night studying of plays, gone with 2 words. But coach, Marcus said carefully, I've led every rep this week. You said I was ready. Reddick shrugged. Plans change. We're going with what's best for the team. Marcus's jaw tightened. What's best for the team? Or what looks best? Reddick's eyes flicked up, his smirk sharp. Watch your tone, son. This is my field. He turned, signaling the kickoff team. The whistle blew and the crowd roared. Marcus stood frozen on the sideline, helmet still in hand, realizing this wasn't about football anymore. This was a message, a reminder of where he stood, not just on the depth chart, but in the world Reddick controlled. Marcus took a slow breath, forcing calm into his voice. Coach, with all due respect, I've earned my spot. Reddick didn't even glance his way. And you've earned a seat. Take it. The team around them fell silent. Tommy shifted awkwardly, guilt flickering across his face. Coach, maybe not a word, Reed! Reddick snapped. Focus on leading like a real quarterback. Marcus bit down hard, tasting bitterness. A real quarterback? He repeated under his breath. Reddick smiled, just enough for Marcus to see it. You heard me. The words carried weight, heavy, coded, and cruel. The crowd didn't hear the exchange, but they saw enough. Marcus standing alone, while the white backup ran the team onto the field. The cameras caught Reddick's smirk. The broadcasters called it a strategic coaching decision. Marcus sat on the bench, fists tight against his knees, heart pounding in disbelief. He had stayed silent before, but silence was starting to feel like surrender. News of the last-minute change spread like wildfire through the bleachers. Some fans booed, others cheered for Tommy. Parents whispered in confusion. Why'd he bench Marcus? Wasn't he their best shot? Marcus's mother sat in the stands, her hand pressed against her chest. Stay strong, baby, she whispered to herself. A group of older men near the concession stand muttered, Guess the coach came to his senses. That other kid's too flashy anyway. Another voice replied, Yeah, but he wins. But the damage was done. Marcus could feel every glance, every whisper cutting through the noise. For some, it was just a football decision. For others, it was confirmation of what they already believed, that no matter how hard he worked, someone else would always be given the chance he earned. And in that stadium, betrayal didn't need words. It echoed in silence. The first drive was a disaster. Tommy missed an open receiver, then another. By the third series, he fumbled the snap. The crowd's energy dimmed, replaced by restless murmurs. Players looked at one another, waiting for Reddick to make the call everyone knew was right. Coach, the offensive coordinator whispered, we need Marcus. Reddick's jaw tightened. We stick to the plan. Another incomplete pass. Another groan from the stands. Marcus sat motionless, helmet balanced between his knees. He wasn't rooting for failure, but every mistake on that field burned deeper. Not because Tommy was failing, but because Marcus wasn't allowed to try. Reddick's pride was the wall between justice and logic, and every second that passed built it higher. By halftime, even the boosters were shaking their heads. But Reddick? He just stood there, pretending control as everything unraveled before him. Guess Reddick was right, a voice murmured behind the bench. Knew that black kid couldn't handle pressure. Marcus froze. He turned slightly. A pair of middle-aged men in team jackets leaned on the fence, talking like he wasn't even there. He's too emotional. Not built for leadership, one said. The other chuckled. He's an athlete, not a quarterback. Marcus's throat tightened. Every fiber in him wanted to shout, to fight, to do something. But he just stared at the field, jaw locked. Because if he reacted, if he so much as looked angry, they'd say he was proving them right. He'd been fighting 2 games all along, one with a football and one with perception. And in this one, every move he made could be used against him. The scoreboard wasn't the only thing keeping score. Reddick's temper finally snapped late in the third quarter. After another fumble, he yanked his headset off and muttered, Should have known better than to trust that boy's game plan. He thought no one heard, but a camera boom hovered just behind him. The word boy, sharp, loaded, unmistakable, cuts through the noise. The broadcast mic caught it. So did 100 cell phones in the crowd. Gasps rippled through the bleachers. Parents exchanged looks. Reporters turned. The assistant coach froze mid-step. Marcus stared at Reddick, his pulse thundering. What did you just say? Reddick's face went pale. You're imagining things. No, Marcus said, voice low, steady. Everyone heard it. The sideline went silent. For the first time, the entire stadium saw the mask drop, the quiet bias laid bare under bright lights. And somewhere in the stands, phones kept recording. The world had just witnessed what Marcus had been living all season. Marcus turned away before anyone could see his face. His chest heaved, eyes burning as thunder cracked overhead. He wanted to scream, to quit, to walk off that field and never look back. But he couldn't. He stood there, drenched in humiliation, every heartbeat pounding with the weight of generations. This wasn't just his breaking point. It was the moment the world finally saw the storm he'd been carrying. The crowd stirred. A hooded figure rose from the stands. Removing his cap as cameras turned, Jamal whispered under his breath, eyes wide. Wait, is that Patrick Mahomes? Everything stopped. Mind if I take a look? The voice cut through the stunned silence like thunder after lightning. Every head turned. Patrick Mahomes stepped forward, calm but commanding. Coach Reddick froze mid-gesture, clipboard trembling slightly in his hand. Mahomes' gaze swept across the field, then settled on Marcus. He's the quarterback, right? Reddick swallowed hard. He was. We decided to make a late adjustment. Mahomes raised an eyebrow. Interesting. It didn't look like a strategy from up there. It looked personal, the crowd murmured. Phones lifted. The tension thickened. Sir, I appreciate your concern, Reddick started, voice shaking. But this is my team. Mahomes took a step closer. And that's your problem. You think leadership means control. It doesn't. It means trust. Marcus's pulse thundered. For the first time all night, the crowd wasn't looking at Reddick with respect. They were watching him with doubt. Mahomes turned back to Marcus, his tone softening. You've got a heart, kid. I could see that even from the bleachers. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. Reddick forced a nervous smile. Look, Mr. Mahomes, you don't know the full story. Mahomes didn't flinch. I know enough. I saw a coach talk down to a player who's done nothing but show respect. He folded his arms. You didn't lose a game tonight, Coach. You lost your integrity. Reddick tried to laugh it off. You're misunderstanding. No, Mahomes interrupted. You just need to treat your players right. That's it. That's how teams win. Not through power trips, not through pride. A ripple of applause spread through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Marcus's teammates exchanged looks, silent agreement replacing fear. Reddick's face tightened as his authority crumbled under the weight of truth. And Mahomes? He didn't raise his voice once. He didn't need to. The truth was louder than any whistle. Mahomes looked at Marcus. You still got your arm warm? Marcus blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. Sir, let's see the kid throw, Mahomes said simply. The crowd erupted. Reddick tried to intervene. That's not necessary. Mahomes' stare cut him off. If it's really about performance, then let's test it. Marcus's hands trembled as he stood. Every eye was on him, thousands of them. Jamal clapped him on the shoulder. You got this, man? Marcus swallowed hard, feeling the weight of humiliation, anger, and years of being underestimated gather into something new, something fierce. This wasn't about one game anymore. It was about proving that talent doesn't come with a color. He took his position, breathing deep. Reddick folded his arms, trying to look indifferent. But his eyes betrayed fear. The stage was set for redemption. Marcus gripped the ball. Rain drizzled across the field. But his focus narrowed until everything else vanished. He took a step back, then another, and launched. The ball cut through the air like a line of fire, spinning clean, steady, beautiful. 60 yards away, Jamal sprinted downfield, reaching out, and the ball dropped perfectly into his hands. The crowd gasped, then roared. Mahomes nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Reddick's clipboard slipped from his grasp. Hitting the turf with a hollow thud. 60 yards, someone whispered. In the rain, Marcus exhaled, chest rising and falling. Every doubt, every insult, every whispered slur, gone. That throw wasn't just a pass, it was defiance. It was truth in motion. Mahomes looked at Reddick. Still think he wasn't ready? Reddick said nothing. The field belonged to Marcus now, and everyone knew it. Mahomes turned toward the cameras. You see that? More control than most pros I know. The crowd erupted again, chanting Marcus's name. Reporters scribbled furiously. Scouts in the stands exchanged nods. Reddick's face was drained of color. Sometimes, Mahomes continued, it's not about talent. It's about the courage to let it shine. Marcus stood silently, letting the words sink in. What had once been humiliation had become a reckoning, not just for him, but for every player ever benched for the wrong reasons. And under those lights, truth finally outshined authority. Mahomes turned back to Marcus, smiling. Have you ever thought about Texas Tech? Marcus blinked, stunned. Texas Tech? Are you serious? Mahomes nodded. You've got something rare. Don't let anyone bench that again. The stadium exploded with cheers. Marcus's heart pounded, not from shock, but from hope. For the first time, opportunity looked him in the eyes. Reddick tried to recover, shouting over the noise, "This is out of context!" But it was too late. Players spoke up. Parents recorded. Assistants whispered to reporters. The truth spread faster than he could spin it. Justice had found its voice. By morning, the internet burned with outrage. Bench racism trended worldwide. Clips of Mahomes' confrontation went viral. Every sentence dissected. Every look analyzed. Marcus's quiet defiance became a symbol. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement, one that demanded accountability, equality, and respect in every field, effective immediately. Those two words echoed across every screen in town. The school board's statement was brief. Coach Reddick suspended pending investigation for misconduct and discriminatory behavior. Parents nodded. Players stayed silent. The man who once barked orders and demanded respect was now a headline about accountability. Marcus scrolled through the news in disbelief. For the first time, he wasn't the one under scrutiny. Justice had found its mark. Reddick's voice, once booming across the field, had been replaced by whispers of change. Power had shifted, not by anger, but by truth finally being heard. Mahomes called the next morning. "You've got options now, kid," he said, his voice steady. "Texas Tech, LSU, even Alabama wants a look." Marcus laughed softly. "Feels unreal." "Believe it," Mahomes replied. "You earned it. Every rep, every night you stayed when nobody watched. Don't ever let them define you again. It wasn't just mentorship. It was brotherhood. Mahomes wasn't teaching football anymore. He was teaching Marcus how to own his worth in a world that once doubted his place in it. Cameras flashed as Marcus stepped to the microphone. "This isn't just about me," he began, voice steady but full of feeling. "It's about every kid who's been told they're too different to lead. Every player benched for reasons that had nothing to do with skill." The crowd leaned in. "I could have stayed quiet," he continued, "but silence protects the system, not the people. We don't need permission to be great. Just opportunity," reporters typed furiously. Tears filled his mother's eyes. He smiled faintly. If this moment can open even one door for someone else, then it's worth it. The applause that followed wasn't for a football player. It was for a young man who turned pain into purpose. Months later, Marcus stood beneath the same floodlights that once watched his humiliation. Only now, his name echoed through the stands, not in whispers, but in cheers. He took a slow breath. Looking up at the sky that had once felt so far away, Jamal jogged over, grinning. "Crazy, huh? Same field, different story," Marcus smiled. "Nah, same story, just a better ending." And as the whistle blew, he knew he wasn't just playing the game. He was rewriting it. The lights dimmed, but the message remained. Change begins where courage meets opportunity, and one voice can echo for generations. If you were in those stands, watching Marcus get humiliated, hearing the slur echo across the field, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent or spoken up? Do you believe Coach Reddick deserves forgiveness for his actions, or should he face the full consequences of his bias? Your opinion defines the lesson this story leaves behind. If you stand for equality, share this story. Post it, talk about it, tag Dial Bench Racism. Because talent has no color, only dedication, discipline, and heart. Comment your thoughts. Subscribe for more real stories that challenge injustice. Together, your voice turns awareness into action, one story at a time.